Hello everyone. In this PowerPoint presentation, we're going to discuss the components of the educational process. At the end of this lecture, you should be able to identify the components of educational process and discuss the relationship between the components of educational process. To formally start our lecture, kindly reflect on this question. What do you think are the components in the educational process? Keep your answer for the moment and check it later after our discussion. For now, listen attentively and take note of the concepts discussed in this lecture. Are you ready? Reflecting your classroom experiences in your day-to-day classes over the years, you realize that there is a process that is going on and on. This process includes learning experiences, learning objectives or learning outcomes, and measurement and evaluation. These are what we call the components of the educational process. These three components of the educational process are interrelated to one another. It means that the absence of one has a detrimental effect on achieving the desired outcomes. Learning experiences is the first component. Learning objectives is the second component. Measurement and evaluation is the third component. These components are dynamic in nature. It goes on and on until such time that appropriate and relevant standards are being set and attained. Let us discuss first the component, which is the learning experiences. Learning experiences are learning activities that happen before the proper lesson, such as reading an article, checking of attendance, or submission of assignment. Learners' activities can happen also during the lesson, like experimentation, lecturing, or recitation. Learners' activities can also happen after the lesson, like taking a quiz or summarizing a lesson. Notice that learners' activities usually happen inside the classroom. It means that learning takes place within the four walls of the classroom setting. In our present situation, these learning experiences dramatically change to a new form of learning space due to COVID-19 pandemic. That learning takes place beyond the four walls of the classroom. These learning experiences happen in the so-called virtual classroom. We are using internet space to communicate with one another and to learn a new set of skills. In this kind of setup, students usually do study independently. However, students are not only bounded to study alone, but they can always keep in touch with their classmates and teachers to clarify concepts. With the new form of learning modality, the students will learn skills like self-direction and self-regulation in order to succeed in an online or offline class. However, the performance of the students during the online or offline class should not be compromised, but it should assess most appropriately. The second component is the learning objectives or learning outcomes. The teacher sets learning objectives or learning outcomes before the execution of any lesson where the learning experiences are made evident. What does learning objective mean? What do you think is the purpose of the learning objective in the teaching learning process. Learning objectives are statements that give directions to the students to attain or achieve specific concepts and skills or competencies. The formal definition of learning objectives will be elaborated and discussed thoroughly in the next lecture. Let's proceed to the third component of the educational process, the measurement and evaluation. Evaluation is the end product of the assessment process. It is in this evaluation where the decision making takes place in terms of the performance of learners. Evaluation drawn from the assessment will provide an opportunity for decision making in terms of the student's performance, which can translate into innovation in the teaching learning process. Teacher expects to assess and evaluate the performance of his or her students with the implementation of intervention to improve learning. Teacher uses the result of assessment and evaluation to redesign and plan their lessons appropriately. Likewise, teacher identifies the appropriate teaching methodologies to utilize in the classroom. Hence, the role of teachers in the teaching learning process is very crucial to implement the teaching learning process effectively. As we end this lecture, let us go back to the question I posted before. What do you think are the major components in the educational process? I am pretty sure you were able to answer the question correctly.